I spent 5 years saving for my MBA. Every birthday check, every bonus, every extra shift, all carefully deposited into my account until I finally reached $120,000. The feeling of accomplishment lasted exactly 3 days. That is when I discovered my parents had emptied my account to help my sister Abigail, the eternal golden child, buy her dream house. I was devastated, furious, and completely helpless until my Uncle Jake, my mother's brother, heard what happened. His 3-part plan for justice changed everything. Before I dive into this story, let me know where you are watching from and hit that like and subscribe button if your family has ever betrayed your trust. The journey from theft to justice taught me lessons about family that I will never forget. Growing up in suburban Seattle, the difference in how my parents treated me versus my younger sister Abigail was obvious to everyone except them. I was 4 years old when Abigail was born, and the shift in my parents' attention and affection was immediate and dramatic. What began as natural focus on a newborn never readjusted to a balanced approach to parenting. The examples of their different treatment were countless and painful. While I wore secondhand clothes and shoes until they fell apart, Abigail had a closet full of brand new outfits for every season. My parents attended every one of her dance recitals, sitting front row with flowers and recording equipment. Meanwhile, they missed my debate team competitions where I repeatedly won regional championships, claiming they were too busy with work. By the time I turned 15, I was working weekends at a local grocery store to earn money for anything beyond basic necessities. In contrast, my parents funded Abigail's horse riding lessons, summer camps, and private tutoring, despite her mediocre grades. When I brought home straight, as my accomplishment was acknowledged, with a distracted good job before the conversation, immediately shifted to how Abigail was struggling with math and needed more support. Throughout high school, I continued to excel academically while participating in extracurricular activities that cost my parents nothing. I joined the debate team, volunteered at the local library, and maintained my part-time job. My hard work earned me a partial scholarship to State University, which my parents deemed good enough, though not worth a celebration. When Abigail graduated 2 years later with a C average, they threw an elaborate party and promised to fund her education at an expensive private college because she needed the extra attention that a smaller school would provide. Despite all evidence to the contrary, I kept trying to earn my parents' approval and recognition. I maintained perfect attendance, avoided trouble of any kind, and continued to achieve academically. None of it seemed to register with my parents, who were perpetually concerned with Abigail's latest crisis or accomplishment, no matter how minor. Abigail quickly learned to use her naturally charming personality to manipulate our parents and other adults. With her bright smile and outgoing nature, she could convince almost anyone to give her what she wanted. By age 5, she had mastered the art of the strategic tantrum, knowing precisely when tears would be most effective in getting her way. Our family rules applied exclusively to me while being merely suggestions for Abigail. Her curfew flexed based on her social calendar, her chores were frequently forgotten without consequence, and her responsibilities were often shifted to me with my parents' full support. When she failed her driving test twice, my father hired a premium instructor to give her private lessons. When I had struggled with parallel parking, his advice had been to practice more in the empty grocery store lot. School provided no escape from the double standard. Abigail routinely handed in assignments late, with teachers making exceptions because she was so creative and marched to her own drummer. When I once asked for a single-day extension on a project due to illness, I was lectured about responsibility and planning ahead. Abigail frequently took credit for group work. She contributed little to charming her way to good grades despite minimal effort. As we entered our teen years, even Abigail's friends began noticing her self-centered behavior. I overheard conversations where they complained about how she always had to be the center of attention, borrowed things without asking, and rarely reciprocated favors. Yet with our parents, she maintained the image of the perfect, albeit slightly misunderstood daughter who just needed their unwavering support to thrive. My financial discipline began early out of necessity. From age 16, I worked part-time during school years and full-time during summers, saving the majority of my earnings. While my parents fully funded Abigail's education at Westlake Private College, I cobbled together my partial scholarship, financial aid, and my own savings to attend State University. I lived in the cheapest off-campus housing available, prepared all my own meals, and continued working 20 hours a week while maintaining a full course load. Through careful planning and constant sacrifice, I graduated without student loan debt, an accomplishment my parents noted was convenient, but not particularly impressive. Meanwhile, Abigail changed her major 3 times, took 5.5 years to graduate with a liberal arts degree, and had her apartment, car, and living expenses fully covered by our parents. After graduation, I secured an entry-level position at a financial services firm and immediately began implementing my long-term plan. My goal was to work for 5 years while saving aggressively for an MBA from a top business school. I lived with 2 roommates in a small apartment, drove a 15-year-old car that frequently needed repairs, and limited my social activities to free or low-cost options. Every paycheck was carefully budgeted, with at least 40% going directly into my MBA fund. I tracked expenses meticulously, picked up overtime whenever possible, and invested my annual bonuses rather than spending them. When friends took international vacations or bought new cars, I remained focused on my goal, knowing that an MBA from a prestigious program would significantly accelerate my career trajectory and long-term earning potential. After 5 years of discipline and sacrifice, I had accumulated $120,000 in my dedicated MBA account. The money represented countless early mornings, late nights, missed social events, and delayed gratification. I had thoroughly researched programs, prepared for the GMAT, and was ready to begin applications for the following fall. My parents showed minimal interest in these plans, asking few questions and offering no encouragement. Uncle Jake had been a constant source of support throughout my life. As my mother's younger brother, he had a different perspective on family dynamics and was the only adult who consistently acknowledged the disparity in how my sister and I were treated. A successful contractor who had built his company from scratch, Uncle Jake valued hard work, integrity, and fairness in a way my parents never seemed to grasp. From an early age, I felt a connection with Uncle Jake that was missing with my parents. When I joined Little League, it was Uncle Jake who came to my games and taught me to improve my swing. When I expressed interest in personal finance as a teenager, he gave me books and shared practical advice that would later shape my career choice. Throughout college, he checked in regularly, offering mentorship and occasionally sending care packages with necessities my parents forgot to provide. Uncle Jake had built his construction business through determination and smart business decisions rather than formal education. He recognized my academic abilities and supported my MBA aspirations, understanding that different paths work for different people. He had observed my parents' favoritism for years, occasionally making subtle comments to them about the imbalance, but always maintaining respectful family relations. His own family life provided a stark contrast to my parents' approach. Uncle Jake and Aunt Diana treated their 3 children with consistent expectations and equitable support, adjusting for individual needs without playing favorites. Their home was a refuge for me during college breaks when the disparity at my parents' house became too painful to bear. The discovery that would alter my family relationships forever came on a routine Tuesday morning. I logged into my bank account to transfer my monthly contribution to my MBA fund, only to find the balance at 0. My heart raced as I scrolled through recent transactions, certain I was the victim of identity theft or bank error. There it was, a single withdrawal of the entire balance processed 3 days earlier. In a panic, I called the bank and was informed that the withdrawal had been properly authorized using account credentials. When I pressed for details, the customer service representative explained that the joint account holders, my parents, had initiated the transfer in person at a branch location. I sat in stunned silence as the representative asked if there was anything else they could help with. The joint account was a relic from childhood, established when I was 15 and got my first job. My parents had insisted on having access just in case, and as I had never experienced financial interference from them before, I had never thought to remove them after reaching adulthood. That oversight had just cost me 5 years of sacrifice and my immediate educational future. I drove to my parents' house immediately, still hoping there was some explanation that would make sense of the situation. They were having breakfast when I arrived, looking surprised but not concerned by my unannounced visit. When I asked about the money, my father casually explained that they had borrowed it for Abigail's house down payment. She found the perfect place but needed to close quickly, he explained, buttering his toast. We knew you had the money just sitting there and she really needed the help. That money was not just sitting there, I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. It was my MBA fund. 5 years of savings. My future. My mother patted my hand dismissively. You can always take out student loans like most people do. Abigail needed a house now that she and Patrick are talking about starting a family. A home is an investment in her future. They promised to pay me back someday, but had no concrete timeline or plan. When I asked how they would feel if I had taken money from them without permission, they seemed genuinely puzzled by the comparison. In their minds, family resources were communal, with allocation decisions made by them based on who they deemed to have the greatest need. And in their eyes, Abigail always had the greater need. Later that same day, Abigail called me not to apologize but to invite me to her housewarming party. When I expressed my anger about the situation, she seemed genuinely surprised. "Mom and Dad said you were fine with it," she said. "Besides, it is not like you needed the money right away. You can still go back to school later." Her complete lack of understanding or remorse was perhaps more painful than the theft itself. The money that represented years of my sacrifice was to her simply a convenient solution to her housing desires. She saw no need to express gratitude or acknowledge the impact on my plans. My parents justified their actions with a series of arguments that revealed how deeply entrenched their favoritism had become. My father explained that Abigail needed the house because of her desire to start a family, while my education plans were framed as a luxury that could easily be deferred. "An MBA is just more school," he said dismissively. "Abigail is building a life." My mother took a more emotional approach, suggesting that my reluctance to help my sister reflected poorly on my character. "Family supports each other," she insisted conveniently, ignoring that the support in our family had always flowed in one direction. When I pointed out that they had never asked me to contribute to Abigail's education, wedding, or car, all of which they had fully funded, she accused me of keeping score in an unbecoming way. They suggested I could just take out loans for my MBA, despite having previously praised my financial responsibility in graduating from undergraduate studies debt-free. The irony that they were forcing me into debt while simultaneously purchasing a house outright for my sister seemed completely lost on them. When I mentioned potentially taking legal action to recover my funds, my father became stern. That would destroy this family, he warned, as if the theft itself had not already done significant damage. "Is money really more important to you than your relationship with your sister and parents?" Abigail's entitlement was on full display in the weeks following the theft. She purchased a 4-bedroom house in Westlake Heights, one of the most expensive neighborhoods in the area, complete with a gourmet kitchen she rarely used, and a backyard large enough for the children she talked about but had not yet planned concretely. Her social media was filled with photos of her new home, carefully staged to highlight its luxurious features, with captions expressing gratitude for being blessed, but no acknowledgement of where the down payment had actually come from. Friends and colleagues commented with congratulations, unaware that her blessing had come at my expense. Within days of moving in, Abigail began calling me with requests for additional financial help. She needed new furniture to match the quality of the house, landscaping to maintain neighborhood standards, and various renovations to make the already beautiful home perfect. Each time I refused as politely as possible, which resulted in complaints to our parents about my selfishness. At a family dinner I reluctantly attended, Abigail casually mentioned that I did not really need an MBA anyway, since I already had a decent job. When I attempted to explain the career advancement and earning potential an MBA would provide, she interrupted to show everyone photos of the custom cabinets she was considering for her kitchen remodel. The invitation to her housewarming party arrived with a registry link for gifts, as if buying the house with my money was not contribution enough. The registry included high-end appliances, expensive decorative items, and backyard furniture that cost more than my monthly rent. The entitlement was so blatant it would have been laughable if it were not so painful. My initial reaction to the betrayal cycled through shock rage, and finally a deep depression that affected every aspect of my life. I withdrew from family gatherings, ignored calls from my parents, and avoided mutual friends who might ask about the situation. My work performance suffered as I struggled to concentrate, leading to a concerning meeting with my manager about my sudden change in productivity. For weeks, I moved through life in a fog, trying to recalculate my future based on this devastating setback. A quick analysis confirmed what I already knew: replacing the stolen funds would take years, even if I maintained my aggressive saving strategy. The MBA programs I had targeted would likely advance by several tuition increases before I could afford to apply again. Friends were universally outraged on my behalf, many suggesting legal action regardless of family ties. I consulted with an attorney who confirmed I had grounds for a civil case, but warned that litigation against family members would be emotionally draining and could permanently sever relationships. Despite my anger, I was not yet ready to take that step. As weeks passed, my anger hardened into a resigned acceptance. I began researching part-time MBA programs I could potentially afford while working, though they lacked the prestige and networking opportunities of my original targets. I looked into student loans, calculating the decades of debt I would carry if I borrowed the full amount. None of the options offered the clean, debt-free path forward I had worked so hard to create. After a month of processing my options, I reached out to Uncle Jake. We met at a quiet diner far from my parents' neighborhood where I explained the situation in detail. His expression shifted from concern to disbelief, and finally to a controlled anger I had rarely seen from him. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," he said, setting down his coffee cup carefully. "Your parents took your entire MBA fund without asking to buy Abigail a house in Westlake Heights. And they did this knowing you have been saving for 5 years specifically for your education. When I confirmed the details, including the joint account oversight that had made it legally possible." He shook his head slowly. "I am disappointed in my sister," he said quietly. "This goes beyond the usual favoritism. This is theft, plain and simple." Uncle Jake asked detailed questions about the bank account, the timing of the withdrawal, and any documentation I had of my contributions over the years. He requested time to think about possible solutions, but immediately offered to loan me money for any urgent needs. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a glimmer of hope that justice might be possible. "I cannot promise anything yet," Uncle Jake said as we parted, "but I will not let this stand. What they did was wrong, and there needs to be accountability." Over the next 2 weeks, Uncle Jake conducted a thorough investigation into the situation. He consulted with a friend who specialized in banking law, who confirmed that despite the joint account designation, my parents' actions could potentially constitute financial abuse, since the account was clearly intended for my education and contained solely my contributions. Uncle Jake reviewed my meticulous financial records, which documented every deposit into the MBA fund over the 5-year period. He also examined my parents' pattern of financial support for Abigail throughout our lives, building a comprehensive picture of the systematic favoritism. His construction industry connections provided insight into the real estate side of the situation. The house Abigail had purchased was significantly overpriced for the current market, a detail the seller's agent had concealed by emphasizing the need to act quickly. A background check on Abigail's husband, Patrick, revealed concerning debt and a previous bankruptcy that would have made qualifying for a conventional mortgage difficult without the substantial down payment. Armed with this information, Uncle Jake developed what he called the 3-part plan to recover my funds and address the underlying family dynamic. Part 1 is legal leverage, he explained when we met again. While we hope not to go to court, having documentation of potential fraud and account misuse gives us negotiating power. Part 2 is financial pressure. I have relationships with several banks in the area, including the one holding your sister's mortgage. A formal review of her loan application focusing on the source of the down payment could create significant problems for your parents and sister. Part 3 is family accountability. I have spoken with several family members who agree your parents crossed a line. We will hold a family meeting where they must face the consequences of their actions with witnesses who will not allow them to minimize what they did. Uncle Jake laid out a detailed timeline for implementing each part of the plan. We prepared documentation, assigned roles to trusted allies, and developed contingency strategies for various potential responses from my parents and sister. Throughout the planning, he emphasized that our goal was recovery rather than revenge, keeping the door open for eventual family healing if genuine accountability occurred. The plan was set in motion with a formal letter from Uncle Jake's attorney friend to my parents, outlining the potential legal issues with their unauthorized use of my funds. The carefully worded document stopped short of threatening immediate legal action but made it clear that this option remained on the table. Simultaneously, Uncle Jake contacted a former client who worked at Abigail's mortgage lender, raising questions about the verification process for her down payment funds. This triggered an internal review of the loan, causing immediate panic for Abigail when she received notification that her mortgage was under examination. Strategic conversations with extended family members ensured that my parents could not simply dismiss the situation as a misunderstanding or family squabble. Aunt Diana called my mother, directly expressing her shock at how they had treated me, and making it clear that the extended family was paying attention to how they would make this right. My parents' initial reaction was predictably dismissive. My father called Uncle Jake, angrily accusing him of interfering in matters that did not concern him. My mother left tearful voicemails claiming I was tearing the family apart by involving outsiders. Both insisted that helping Abigail with her house was simply what loving parents would do, continuing to ignore that they had done so with stolen funds rather than their own money. Their tone changed dramatically when the mortgage review moved to a formal investigation, raising the possibility that Abigail's loan could be called due immediately if the down payment was found to be improperly sourced. Suddenly, what they had dismissed as a family disagreement had real-world consequences that threatened their daughter's new home. Uncle Jake called a family meeting at his house, inviting my parents, Abigail and her husband, and 2 neutral family members to serve as witnesses. My parents arrived looking subdued, while Abigail alternated between tearful self-pity and simmering anger. Her husband, Patrick, sat uncomfortably at the edge of the group, clearly aware of the ethical issues, but unwilling to challenge his wife or in-laws. "We are here because a serious breach of trust has occurred." Uncle Jake began, his contractor voice commanding attention. $120,000 was taken without permission from an account clearly designated for education purposes. This money represents 5 years of sacrifice and hard work by your son, and it was taken without his knowledge or consent to purchase a luxury home for your daughter, who has historically received disproportionate financial support. He laid out the facts, methodically preventing interruptions with a raised hand when my parents or Abigail attempted to object. He detailed the potential legal consequences, the mortgage irregularities, and the unanimous concern from extended family members. "You have 48 hours to return the full amount plus reasonable interest to a new account that will be in your son's name only," Uncle Jake concluded. "If you fail to do so, the legal documents already prepared will be filed and the formal complaint to the mortgage lender will proceed. Those actions will have consequences far beyond the money itself." The room fell silent as the ultimatum hung in the air. For perhaps the first time, my parents and sister recognized that their actions had consequences beyond our immediate family circle. After a few attempts at justification that fell flat under Uncle Jake's steady gaze, they departed without resolution. The 48 hours that followed were the longest of my life. I received no communication from my parents or Abigail, leading me to believe they might be willing to risk the consequences rather than admit wrongdoing. Uncle Jake counseled patience, assuring me that the pressure points he had identified were significant enough to force action before the deadline. On the morning of the deadline, I received a notification from my bank of a new deposit, $126,000, representing the original amount plus interest. A text message from my father followed shortly, informing me tersely that they had taken out a home equity loan to return the money and expected us to attend a family meeting at their house that evening. The atmosphere at my parents' home was tense, but notably different from previous confrontations. My father, typically dominant and dismissive, seemed deflated. My mother's usual emotional manipulations were subdued. Abigail sat with arms crossed, tear streaks visible on her cheeks. "We have returned your money as requested," my father began stiffly. "While we still believe family resources should be shared, we recognize that taking your savings without permission was inappropriate. We apologize for the distress this has caused." It was not the heartfelt accountability I might have hoped for, but coming from parents who had never before acknowledged any favoritism or wrongdoing, it represented significant progress. Uncle Jake, who had accompanied me for support, nodded slightly but remained silent, allowing the moment to unfold. Uncle Jake had established clear conditions for rebuilding our family relationship, which he reiterated now that the money had been returned. My parents and sister would attend financial counseling to address their entitlement issues and boundary problems. All family members would maintain separate accounts with formal agreements for any future financial interactions. Most importantly, my parents would need to demonstrate ongoing recognition of their favoritism pattern and take concrete steps to create more balanced relationships with both their children. My mother tearfully acknowledged that their parenting had been unbalanced. "We never meant to hurt you," she said, echoing a lifetime of unintentional but very real harm. "We just always saw Abigail as needing more help and you as being so capable on your own." "Being capable should not have meant being unsupported," I replied quietly. "And being needy should not have entitled Abigail to everything. including what was not yours to give. My father nodded slowly, the beginning of genuine recognition visible in his expression. We have taken you for granted, he admitted, and enabled behaviors in your sister that have not served her well in the long run. Abigail's initial response to the situation was predictable anger at losing her money. She lashed out during family counseling sessions, accusing me of being selfish, and Uncle Jake of turning the family against her. The financial counselor patiently but firmly redirected these accusations, helping her see that the money had never been hers to begin with. The turning point for Abigail came after a serious conversation with her husband Patrick, who finally expressed his discomfort with how the house had been funded. I did not marry you to take advantage of your brother, he told her. If we cannot afford a house, honestly, we should not have that house. Gradually, Abigail began to recognize the pattern of entitlement that had shaped her approach to life. She acknowledged that her house purchase had been built on an unethical foundation and made a formal agreement to repay our parents for her portion of the funds over time. While her apology to me was initially awkward and somewhat self-centered, it represented her first genuine admission of wrongdoing in our entire relationship. Her friends expressed shock when she finally explained how the house had been purchased, and then nearly lost. Several distanced themselves from her, uncomfortable with her family's actions. This social consequence perhaps affected her more deeply than the financial ramifications, forcing her to confront how her behavior appeared to others outside the protective bubble our parents had created. With my MBA fund restored and secured in an account under my name, only I proceeded with applications to business schools. The personal statement section provided an unexpected opportunity to demonstrate resilience and ethical clarity as I carefully explained the delayed application without vilifying my family. 3 months later, I received an acceptance letter from my top choice program, complete with a small merit scholarship that recognized my professional experience and academic potential. Uncle Jake continued to provide guidance and support, connecting me with business contacts who could offer mentorship during my studies. His consistent presence in my life reinforced the importance of having people who respect boundaries and value fairness, a stark contrast to the dynamic I had grown up with. The experience forced me to develop stronger financial boundaries with my family, a change that proved healthy for all of our relationships. I established clear expectations about money discussions, declined invitations to contribute to Abigail's ongoing house expenses, and maintained transparency about my own financial decisions without seeking approval or validation from my parents. The family healing process was neither quick nor linear. My parents would occasionally slip into old patterns, particularly when Abigail faced challenges that triggered their protective instincts. The difference now was that these patterns were named and addressed, rather than silently endured. Family counseling provided tools for healthier communication with our therapist, serving as an objective voice when discussions became heated. Slowly, my parents began acknowledging my achievements with genuine interest and pride. When I completed my first semester of business school with top grades, my father called specifically to congratulate me, a conversation that focused entirely on my accomplishment without any mention of Abigail. My mother attended a campus networking event as my guest, actively engaging with my professors and classmates, rather than finding reasons why such academic settings were not her thing. Abigail and I developed a more balanced sibling relationship, though trust remained a work in progress. She began taking real steps toward financial independence, finding a job that utilized her creative skills within a structured environment, and sticking with it even when it became challenging. Her social media posts shifted from materialistic displays to more authentic sharing occasionally, including reflections on personal growth and responsibility. The experience taught me that justice and accountability need not destroy family bonds if approached with clarity rather than vengeance. Uncle Jake's intervention provided a model for how to stand firm on important boundaries while still leaving room for relationship repair. The 3-part plan addressed the immediate financial wrong while also targeting the underlying patterns that had allowed such a situation to develop. Today, I am halfway through my MBA program, maintaining the top 10% of my class while building valuable industry connections. My relationship with my parents continues to evolve with more honest conversations and clearer expectations on both sides. Abigail and I have found common ground in our shared experience of growing beyond our assigned family roles. She is the entitled princess, and I as the overlooked provider. I remain deeply grateful for Uncle Jake's intervention and the wisdom with which he handled a situation that could have permanently fractured our family. His approach demonstrated that holding people accountable can ultimately be an act of love when done with the goal of creating healthier dynamics rather than punishment. The painful experience of having my savings stolen ultimately led to greater self-advocacy, clearer boundaries, and a family system that, while imperfect, is significantly more balanced than before. Have you ever experienced family favoritism or financial betrayal? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below sharing your story or what you would have done in my situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the journey to justice. Do not forget to share this video with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves is both possible and necessary. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the path to healing requires courage to confront uncomfortable truths.